Imagine stepping onto a football field, hearing the roar of the crowd, the thud of the pads, and feeling the air thick with tension. Now imagine one man on that field, a man so feared that wide receivers thought twice before running across the middle. His name was John David Tatum. He didn't tackle, he detonated. Every hit felt like a car crash wrapped in shoulder pads. In his book, They Call Me Assassin, he said, "I like to believe my best hits border on felonious assault." That was the philosophy of John Tatum, Jack to the world, and the assassin to every opponent who dared cross the middle of the field. He was the most feared enforcer on one of the most fearsome defenses in football history, the Oakland Raiders' Soul Patrol. His legend was built on violence, speed, and precision. This is the story of Jack Tatum, the paradox of power, and the devastating price of being the assassin. 3 Pro Bowls, a Super Bowl ring, and a reputation that made even the toughest men look over their shoulders. But this isn't just about the hits, it's about the price of them, the one moment that changed football forever. This is the story of Jack Tatum, the most violent hitter in NFL history. Before he was the assassin, he was just John David Tatum, a quiet kid born on November 18, 1948 in Cherryville, North Carolina. His early life wasn't glamorous. His family didn't have much. When they moved north to Passaic, New Jersey, Jack learned fast that toughness wasn't a choice, it was survival. He wasn't the biggest kid, but he had something more dangerous, a mindset. If life was gonna hit him, he'd hit it back harder. At Passaic High School, football found him almost by accident. He excelled on both sides of the ball, playing running back and defensive back, quickly earning all-state honors. He possessed an innate, almost shocking ability to generate force, a rare compact engine of sudden acceleration and impact. His raw, undeniable talent drew the attention of college football's ultimate authority figure, Woody Hayes of Ohio State University. Hayes, the famously volatile, iron-fisted coach, recruited Tatum as a running back, but it was his assistant coach Lou Holtz who saw the future. Holtz convinced Hayes that Tatum's unparalleled aggression and tackling form would be a difference maker on defense. It was a career-defining move. Tatum became a foundational piece of the legendary Super Softs class of 1968. He was a cornerstone of a defense that led the Buckeyes to a national championship in his very first year. His coming-out party arrived early in that season during a pivotal matchup against the undefeated and number 1 ranked Purdue Boilermakers, featuring All-American running back Leroy Keys. Tatum, just a sophomore, was tasked with shadowing the nation's premier offensive threat. The Buckeyes blanked Purdue 13-0, and Tatum earned national recognition for the way he physically dominated Keys, tackling him with a ferocity that defied his 6-foot, 200-pound frame. For the next 3 years, Jack Tatum was a consensus All-American. In 1970, he was named National Defensive Player of the Year, a title that felt inevitable by then. That same season, he finished 7th in Heisman voting, almost unthinkable for a defensive player. It was proof of how much he'd blurred the line between defense and dominance. Under Woody Hayes, his violent style wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Hayes even created something called the Jack Tatum Hit of the Week at practice, rewarding the hardest, most punishing tackle. At Ohio State, Tatum's aggression wasn't a problem to fix, but it was a standard to chase. He was a hybrid player, part safety and part linebacker, the kind of player who didn't fit neatly into a position. Sometimes he lined up close to the line just to unleash his power on bigger backs and tight ends. Without realizing it, Tatum was shaping the blueprint for the modern defensive back. But the NFL wasn't ready for what was coming, because the world was about to meet the assassin. In 1971, the Oakland Raiders drafted Jack Tatum in the first round, 19th overall. It wasn't merely a roster move, it was a cultural fusion. Under Al Davis, the Raiders weren't just building a team, they were building an attitude. Davis didn't want polite players who followed the rules. He wanted intimidators, men who could win games and break spirits at the same time. They sought individuals who embodied the team's guiding principle, a commitment to excellence built on a foundation of raw, unapologetic aggression. Tatum fit the silver and black uniform like a second skin. He wasted no time establishing his professional reputation. In his very first regular season game, he delivered a crushing blow that knocked out All-Pro tight end John Mackey of the Baltimore Colts. When Mackey's replacement, Tom Mitchell, entered the game, Tatum leveled him too. It was a shocking debut that sent an immediate message across the league that going over the middle against the Raiders now required a price. Tatum became the linchpin of one of the most iconic and terrifying secondaries in NFL history, the Soul Patrol, alongside Hall of Fame cornerback Willie Brown and the equally brutal safeties George Atkinson and Skip Thomas. They formed a quartet whose sole purpose seemed to be inflicting punishment. Atkinson, who later became Tatum's partner in the backfield, openly admitted that they were paid to frighten and injure opponents. In a later reflection, Atkinson said, "If you don't want to get hit, it's best not to show up when we play Sunday. I guarantee you'll get hit." Tatum's style was an analytical study in violence. His hits were rarely flagged as illegal because they were almost always perfectly timed, but they were executed with a deliberate, bone-jarring physics designed not just to stop the play, but to stop the man. He was famous for the hook tackle, a technique he described as trying to catch the receiver's neck and head with his flexing biceps and forearm, stripping him not just of the ball, but his courage. By the mid-1970s, Jack Tatum wasn't just a player, it was a warning. Every receiver in the league knew the rule: don't cross the middle when 32 is back there. Tatum's career was defined by two opposing epoch-making moments that perfectly captured the paradox of his philosophy. The first was an incident of infamy that remains perhaps the most debated play in league history, the Immaculate Reception. It was the 1972 AFC Divisional Playoff game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. With seconds left and the Raiders clinging to a 7-6 lead, Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw fired a desperate pass to running back John "Frenchie" Fuqua. Tatum converged on Fuqua like a missile. His intent was not to simply defend the pass, but to deliver a signature devastating hit. The resulting contact shoulder to head sent the ball flying backward, ricocheting through the air. Franco Harris, the Steelers' running back, plucked the ball out of the air just before it hit the turf, ran for the game-winning touchdown. The controversy was simple. If Tatum, an opposing defensive player, had been the only one to touch the ball, the play was legal. But if Fuqua, the intended receiver, had been the only one, the pass was incomplete by the rules of the time. In the chaos, the officials ruled that Tatum had touched the ball. For years, Raiders fans pointed to that moment as proof that Tatum's hyper-aggressive style, his instinct to prioritize the brutal collision over the strategic pass breakup, had cost them a trip to the Super Bowl. A hit that was supposed to embody his ruthless excellence instead resulted in a heartbreaking defeat that became football lore. 4 years later, however, Tatum's style was fully vindicated on the biggest stage. In Super Bowl XI at the end of the 1976 season, the Raiders finally faced the Minnesota Vikings. The Raiders dominated 32-14, but the indelible image of the game belonged to Jack Tatum. Vikings receiver Sammy White caught a pass and turned upfield. Tatum met him at full speed, delivering such a ferocious, perfectly timed hit that White's helmet was not only knocked off, but sent flying nearly 5 yards down the field. White was dazed and shaken, yet the pass was complete. However, the message was clear. No victory, no yard gained against the Raiders would come without a traumatic cost. This was the height of the assassin's power. It was the physical manifestation of the Raiders' entire violent identity. A moment of savage glory that secured his ring, his place as one of the most feared athletes in NFL history. All the previous bone-jarring hits, the celebrated ferocity, and the calculated ruthlessness of Jack Tatum's career was overshadowed by one single fateful moment in a meaningless preseason game. It was August 12, 1978. The Oakland Raiders were playing the New England Patriots in an exhibition matchup. Patriots receiver Daryl Stingley ran across the middle, the most dangerous place on the field when Jack Tatum was nearby. As the ball arrived, so did Tatum. Tatum, approaching at a dead sprint, came in high and hard, leading with his shoulder, which struck Stingley's head and neck area. His helmet tilted back, his arms were frozen. The stadium went quiet. Even the Raiders players looked stunned. Stingley immediately collapsed to the turf, motionless. This was catastrophic. Daryl Stingley's 4th and 5th cervical vertebrae were fractured. He was left paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of his life. That moment changed everything. The Stingley incident fundamentally changed the conversation around Jack Tatum, the Oakland Raiders, and the nature of the sport itself. What was once celebrated as hard-nosed or old school was now, in the stark, tragic reality of Stingley's paralysis, exposed as dangerously brutal. The hit was ruled legal by the NFL, but public opinion didn't care. Tatum, once celebrated as a warrior, was now seen as a villain. People demanded apologies, interviews, and remorse. But Jack Tatum stayed silent. He didn't apologize, not because he didn't feel pain, but because he believed he had done his job by the rules of the game. He later said, "I didn't apologize, that was football." I was sorry that he got hurt, but to go out and apologize for the way I played football? Even today, people still think I'm a bad guy. What did I do wrong? Still, the narrative was already written. The assassin had crossed the line. In the years that followed, Stingley tried to rebuild his life, becoming a symbol of grace and forgiveness. Tatum, on the other hand, lived under a cloud of controversy. 2 years after the hit, Tatum published his first autobiography, which was controversially titled Call Me Assassin. His choice to capitalize on his fearsome reputation, even after the tragedy, led to widespread condemnation and solidified the perception that he lacked remorse. While many teammates and contemporaries insisted Tatum was a quiet, almost gentle man off the field, the assassin persona became the final, unmovable definition of his career. The hit eventually led to significant NFL rule changes, most notably the introduction and strict enforcement of rules against using the helmet as a primary weapon, a direct line connecting Tatum's style of play to modern player and safety efforts. Tatum played one final, somewhat subdued season with the Houston Oilers in 1980, ironically registering a career-high 7 interceptions, proving his coverage skills had always been underestimated, ending a career that tallied 37 interceptions and 10 fumble recoveries, but which will forever be remembered for the weight of one single controversial collision. His life after football was marked by a gradual, painful reversal of fortunes that many saw as a grim moralistic irony. Tatum focused on real estate and authored 2 more books, but his final years were dominated by severe health issues. His paralysis from the knee down due to complications from diabetes, leading to the amputation of all 5 toes on his left foot and eventually his lower right leg. It was viewed by some as a cruel and ironic twist of fate. Even in his final writings, Tatum stood by his nature and his craft, writing in his book Final Confessions of NFL Assassin Jack Tatum, "I was paid to hit, the harder the better. I understand why Daryl's considered the victim, but I'll never understand why some people look at me as the villain." The paradox of his career remains his legacy. He was celebrated for his violence, only to become a symbol of its devastating cost. When Daryl Stingley heard the news of Tatum's amputation, his response was a profoundly humane moment that transcended the decades of silence between the two men. Stingley, who had found a way to forgive Tatum in his heart, said, "You can't as a human being feel happy about something like that happening to another human being." He wished Tatum well, noting the irony that they both now carried a cross to bear. In a final act that often goes unmentioned, the assassin did channel his suffering into a positive cause. He became a passionate advocate for diabetes awareness, establishing the Jack Tatum Fund for Youthful Diabetes in Ohio. When Jack Tatum died of a heart attack in 2010, the debate over his legacy flared once more. He remains a Hall of Famer in the minds of many fans and peers, who argue he was statistically dominant and undeniably influential. The story of Jack Tatum is not a simple hero's journey. It's a cautionary tale, a brutal document of the intersection between professional aggression and personal catastrophe. He played a game that asked him to be violent, to be feared, and he answered that call better than anyone. The assassin is gone, but the reverberations of his collisions continue to shape the rules and the conscience of the game today.